record. Okay, hello everyone. I'm here with the business psychologist Robson. He's currently focused on employee feedback and engagement with deep experience in change and significant business experience. Most experience primarily in leadership, engagement, and motivation. Thank you so much for to be here. Rob, is an honor. So,
pleasure.
To start with the questions, let's start talking about your experience in change. To change something that has a deep root in organization is an illusion. Should we talk about what to do in non-changing situations instead of changing situations? Or if it's possible to change in a realistic way, and if so, I want to know which process and most significant changes have you been through already in your experience?
Oh, quite a deep question to start with, I think.
Sorry.
I mean, I think, I don't know if it directly answers your question, but I think that to focus on the change to a certain extent is the wrong thing. I think it's really important to I think in the context of a business, and is to focus on on what you want. So yes, that's what's changing, but it's focus on what is the target behavior, process, etc. And not necessarily describe it in terms of the change, because things change. People now understand and accept that things change all the time. But why should I do this? Why should I do it like this? What's the, what stake do I have in this? How involved have I been in defining the process? Do I believe it's right? All these are the sort of questions that people will have, and I think it's just really important to let people figure it out, understand what it means to them. I've been through a number of large sort of transformation programs in big organizations from sort of day one in my career, when I was sort of more of an IT consultant, actually doing slightly more technical work around SAP, through to I guess 5 years ago was the last time I was really on doing some sort of something sort of large and sort of transformational, which was moving my company to a new headquarters. And I think it's not, I think we can get too bogged down in the change and talk about the change, but actually people just want to know, what's expected of me. Was it like, do I understand it? We have a lot of you get a lot of talk about resistance, but in my experience, you don't get a lot of what I would describe as willful resistance. What you have is confusion or anxiety, or and people raising genuine concerns about how things might work are often labeled as resistance, and and actually really interesting, because you the sort of people that you're often dealing with people who are really really into the detail of what they do, and they see things, they see issues, they see risks, and they get really concerned about that, because they don't want to be dropping the ball. They want to be want things to be smooth. And if you understand that and work with people, it really helps.
Yeah, that's nice.
I don't have no idea if I answered your question at all.
Yeah, no, you answered. Because change, it's like seeing change as a process, not as a thing that you go with. Like,
yeah, I think it's actually just to think of it in terms of where you want to go and help people to get there, rather than focusing on the the mechanics and change, almost away from change as a process. Now, as a change manager or as a consultant working in change, you obviously have to understand how people change and what drives change, but build that into how you interact with people. And you see a lot of people, change consultants and things, standing up in front of a group of people and saying, this is the change curve. Now you might be experiencing denial, and it's utterly pointless. It's just utterly pointless. It's really about where do we want to go? Why are we going there? How do we get there? Get practical, I think. But do it with the models and frameworks you have in the back of your mind, rather than out there in front. So you're not teaching people how much you know about the psychology of behavior change.
Yeah, that's nice actually, because you said like get practical, and talking about that, about change and about getting practical. I want to enter also in the team engagement and ask you how engagement could be a promoter of change, especially in terms of energy. You engage people and people feel more able to change difficult situations and risk situations.
Yeah.
And how in your work you engage people in practical speaking, not using the theory to engage people. Which actions prepare this process of helping people to feel engaged in their work?
Yeah, I mean, engagement is a whole, challenging subject, because, as you probably realize, the research and the theory on employee engagement is kind of all over the place. And it's quite difficult to make sense of it and understand what are we actually working with here. When the work I do in sort of employee engagement is quite theoretical, because it's about building sort of questionnaires, surveys to help diagnose, not really a diagnostic as such, but to kind of draw some insights. And I think so that part of my work is quite theoretical, but there's also this piece of work which is about, okay, we've got some measures, now what are you going to do? And everybody struggles with the step from, okay, I see what data I have, to now this is what I'm going to do with it, because it does require interpretation. So when you see say an engagement survey come at you, well, okay, so that's fine. If we want to improve our score, this is what we might focus on. But if you actually want your people to be more engaged, you have to kind of read between the lines a bit. You have to think about, what does this mean, and what are the implications of some of these things for us as a business, and for what we're trying to achieve, and for our people strategies and things like that. So there is this piece of interpretation, and that's quite challenging. But I think, relating back to change, I think the whole, it's pretty clear that by most definitions of engagement, so we talk about things like energy, focus, we talk about things like alignment to the company objectives, emotional commitment to the organization. Those are all things that will facilitate change. If you're trying to achieve something as an organization, then if you have an engaged workforce, then quite clearly that's an advantage. On the flip side, you do change badly, it's quite easy then to disengage, to disempower people, to make them feel like they don't necessarily have a say, to think about things like self-determination theory, competence, autonomy, competence, relatedness. They don't care about me. They don't care about how I feel about this change. I don't have a say in it. The autonomy. I don't feel equipped to make it work. Competence. It's very easy then to sort of demotivate people, and engagement is ultimately a motivational construct. So so that's the flip side. And now I'm trying to remember what you actually asked me. But yeah, I think engagement and change. So there's general engagement, engagement, employee engagement, if you like, and change. And then obviously there's a whole process of getting people engaged in the change. And I think getting, that engagement as a process, if you like, the process of, getting people interested, removing fear, again, creating those conditions. I go back to self-determination theory quite a lot, creating those conditions that support intrinsic motivation. And I think a big part of that is going beyond, traditional engagement, which is, I'm going to tell you stuff. I'm going to, tell you how great it is and all that stuff, to involvement and getting people to actually give them opportunities to express themselves, to contribute to the design and all that, that sort of thing. And so that, again, autonomy, competence type stuff.
Yeah, no, this is important, because giving people autonomy to feel and to know that they have a responsibility in the field that they are working, and they have results on it, could make them feel engaged on it, like I'm doing something, it's from my own. And let's enter now in the feedback terms that you are always specialist. I want to ask you, Rob, the process of giving feedback in the organizational context also could be a challenge. As we are saying here, everything's a challenge in a complex world that we are living in.
Yeah.
So even though, because people are different, right? And people can accept what you have to say in the feedback process in different ways. Yeah. And what is the biggest challenge for you in this process of giving feedback? And how did you overcome it in your daily routine?
Yeah. So employee feedback, in the sense of if I'm your manager and I want to give you feedback, for example, okay, because there's the other type. There's feedback that what we call employee feedback in the business side, which is about measurement and stuff. But I think the feedback as you describe it is a really interesting one, because whether that is sort of positive praise, or whether it's sort of developmental feedback, constructive developmental feedback, none of us find it easy, really, do we? So let alone, so there's the giving, there's the accepting it, and the giving it, and both. I don't know many people that don't find it a little bit awkward, both either giving feedback or receiving it. And as the giver, I think it's I in my work as a psychologist, a theory that's been important in sort of over the years to me is called reversal theory, and that deals with what is motivating us right now. And I think when we find it difficult to give that feedback, we're self-oriented. We're thinking about our needs, and what maybe I want this person to like me. Yeah. Quite often I don't know if I can deal with it if this person doesn't accept my feedback, and so it's about the giver, whereas if you think about it in terms of being about the receiver, is what I'm going to say helpful? Could it be helpful to them? Is it intended to be helpful to them, and is it intended to help in some way? Then it becomes a lot easier to give, because you see it differently. And then you can say, well, if it's actually not going to be helpful, why would I say it in the first place? Then maybe it's just to make me feel better about getting it off my chest, which isn't really what the purpose of feedback is.
Yeah.
So that's the giving part, and you know, of course, we don't like, many of us don't like conflict. We don't like friction. Even the giving part is awkward, and then there's the receiving, and again, it's about thinking about where are you coming from, you know, and I refer to two different motivations there. I think to a large extent, it's about, you know, we talked about self and other there. I think in many respects, it's about difference between sort of mastery and sympathy. So mastery is about, I want to improve, I want to perform, I want to get better. Sympathy is about, I want to feel cared for, I want to feel nice, you know. And I think a lot of the time we approach the situation from a sort of, as a receiver, from a sympathy perspective, and feel prickled by the feedback, and, you know, do they, you know, hurt, if you like, by, even in just in a small way, not necessarily, you know, deeply wounded, but we receive it in that emotional kind of way. Whereas if you know you're going to receive feedback, and you can think, okay, what can I learn from this, and you approach it from the perspective of learning, then no feedback can do you any harm. You know, it's there to help you improve, and if you don't find it helpful, just filter it. You know, but it's easy to say, less easy to do, and we can all probably relate to experiences where we've received feedback that wasn't necessarily flattering, but it was helpful, but you still had that slight, you know, the burn, yeah.
I can imagine, but it's like what you said, is like you have to filter it, and you have to, like, because something, it's like you were a human resource director, you know, that you need to give feedback. So despite of what people feel hurt or not about the feedback, the feedback is about the job, it's about the improvement, it's not about her, it's not about him, the person in particular, it's about the things that he could do better. So I think it's always good to have this help and look for this in this learning perspective, you know.
I also think sometimes we overplay the importance of feedback.
Do you think so? Why?
I mean, you look at, say, like, I don't know, like this, you look at flow, for example, right? That, and the, you know, key conditions for flow, as well as the challenge, skills, balance is, you know, clear goals and unambiguous feedback. But feedback, if you think about, move away from the work environment, look at sport, right? An athlete is always receiving feedback, but it's not necessarily coming from the mouth of the coach. It might be a clock, it might be video, it might be how the body responds to something. It's all feedbacks, information. And I think information is more useful than feedback. And sometimes we feel that we've got to give feedback when actually what we might, you know, when if there's more information available, then it becomes, in a way, less important. And I think we also need to think about the individual as well. I mean, I had a great relationship with my boss when I was in Tata Technologies. So he was the European MD, and I was the European HRD. And at that time I would have been actually just a general manager, but I'd be in the morning, I would just, if we were in, I would just drop into his office, we would just chat, and I would walk away knowing what I needed to do, and a lot of stuff was unsaid. And if I had a difficult experience with my stakeholders, which is quite common because it's an engineering organization, quite challenging people, also culturally quite difficult. Sometimes, you know, when some of my superiors were sort of Indian and different cultural styles and things. I would I would walk in the morning, think, I want to talk about this. I want to understand it. I want to hear more. And he had this way of not saying much about it, because and letting me know that he knew that I understood what had gone well, what hadn't gone well, and stuff, and that we probably didn't need to go over it. And so there's two things that I think that's two self-aware, experienced people. So the audience, the receipt, so the kind of the needs of understanding the needs of the person that you're dealing with is important. But we had this very different relationship to any I'd had before, where stuff quite often went unsaid, but it was understood.
Yeah.
And that really made me stop and think, sometimes you just don't need
to talk.
The feedback as such, or the feedback is there because it's information. There's already information in my mind that this could have gone better. I kind of understand why, and quite often he would just be, his perspective he would be focused on not how could you do it better next time and all that sort of stuff, but just like, what do you want to do? How do you want to fix it? How do you want to deal with it? Sort of we're in a position where we could go into solutions. And it didn't feel like we were missing a part of the process, So I find that really interesting because it was so different to the relationships I had before. And sometimes feedback feels forced. So we often only give it when it's negative. And often, and I think quite often, people know what they've done, what they could have done better and stuff, and you don't have to make a big deal of it. It's sometimes the act of giving feedback can do. So it's something to do. I don't mean don't give the information, don't give the feedback at all, but sometimes just doing something very gentle, just checking in, not making a song and dance of it is the right thing to do. So it's just and then the stuff, Marcus Buckingham, his book, he comes out very strongly against feedback, and I think it's mainly because it's generally about criticism.
Yeah,
I don't fully agree with that. I think we do I think feedback can also be praise, can also be positive or reinforcing, but we do forget to do that a lot of the time.
Yeah, and this example that you bring, Rob, is an interesting view, because sometimes the thing that has to be said is in the unsaid thing. So he didn't need to say something really specific to you, and you already realize it. So it's what brings us to see what is a good leader, right? And how a good leader deals with the employees in the organization. And for the leader's role, I have another question for you, because I know it's also your experience. So what's, in your opinion, is a good leader in the 21st century?
Wow. I think what's interesting is I spent a lot of the last 20 years sort of saying, there isn't such a thing as a good leader. It's very much about adapting your style to the situation at hand and to people. But I think the context has changed, and there are a set of conditions now that take us slightly back towards thinking, actually, there are certain things we probably do look for in a leader. And I think in particular, the amount of volatility and change that there is in the business environment means we have to be able to sort of, empower or enable people to to work together to come up with new solutions to complex problems. And so that means, I think, a lot more leader as, we talk about things like servant leadership. And so leadership styles that actually, enable people, rather than being directive. And I think also, reflection is really important in leadership. And then, being able to sort of empathize and work with a very diverse group of people, knowing that actually, I think some of the most complex challenges that we face will be best solved by bringing different people into the room and just letting them get on with it. And so that humility of not necessarily having to be the person who takes, is seen as taking the lead, but is creating the conditions, enabling something to happen, and then knowing when to step away is important. So I think none of these things are new, but I think they come into much sharper focus in the in the environment we're in. And it's not just about the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, but it's where we were before, before that. For me, there's been a gradual realization that leadership needs to be a little bit different, but it really accelerated in 2008 in the financial crisis. And it feels like things have been different since then, the amount of volatility in the world.
Yeah, and it's what you said, it's looking at people in different ways, seeing the uniqueness of the person in the organization, and like seeing that in a good way. Like we are living in a world that people want to be the same sometimes.
Yeah.
Some things. So understanding that, and a leader who can see this difference between them and could enhance it, like you said, is.
And I think that there's an important word there, which is to value it.
To value it. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Oh, Rob. Yeah, sorry, you can say.
No.
Yeah, to value it, and that's a difficult thing, right? Because nowadays it's a difficult thing.
Well, it is difficult for, I think, if you're in a leadership position and a certain style has gotten you so far, and you've been rewarded for being a certain way and working within a certain culture for your entire career, to step away from that and to be able to, there's intellectually knowing that it's important, and even morally knowing that it's important to create, an inclusive culture and a diverse, diverse workforce. But then there's the I suppose, like, the more emotional challenge of that means I will be challenged more. It does mean I have to give up some control. It does mean a number of things that I might not be comfortable with as a leader. And there's the bit about working, as a leader, working through that discomfort and accepting it.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. Thank you so much, Rob, for your interview, your words, your values, reflections, and discussions in engagement, motivation, feedback. You really make me as a student see with another view some things, and I'm sure that you will make also people who will see the interview after publication see and think things differently than common sense, right? Because
I hope so.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It was an honor for me to interview you, and I hope you enjoy a little bit this time of reflection.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Okay, so I'm just gonna stop recording and 1 minute.